conquered history, at least in the history of America, that will bear a moment's comparison with this. Tragically, Thoreau is very much wrong about that, isn't he? Whether for the numbers engaged in it or for the patriotism and heroism displayed. For numbers and for carnage, it was an Austerlitz or Dresden, and the fact that he would use Dresden will make us think, of course, of Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5, no question. And then he says it, Concord fight, exclamation point. 2 killed on the Patriots' side, Luther Blanchard wounded. Why, here every ant was a Buttrick. Fire, for God's sake, fire, and thousands shared the fate of Davis and Hosmer. There was not one hireling there. I have no doubt that it was a principle they fought for, as much as our ancestors, and not to avoid a 3-penny tax on their tea. And the results of this battle will be as important and memorable to those whom it concerns as those of the Battle of Bunker Hill, at least. Now, this is, of course, Thoreau took heat for this passage, obviously, because there was a question about, are you reducing the great American Civil War, War of Revolution, down to some ants scrapping with each other on a wood chip outside of your hut? Well, I mean, that's one way to see it. Another way to see it, of course, is to represent the whole notion of struggle for survival, as Darwin will call it, right? The struggle as being heroic, no matter who it is. You get to decide. We'll just simply read the passage. He then tells us that he took the chip, he brought it inside, he put it under a microscope and a tumbler, and he watched for quite some time to see how this thing all kind of worked itself out. In the end, he will tell us that one was the winner, and he let him go, and he probably went off, as he says it, to the hospital for ants or whatever. He says, I don't know. I thought his industry would be not worth much thereafter. He says, I never learned which party was victorious, nor the cause of the war. But I felt the rest of that day as if I had my feelings excited and harrowed by witnessing the struggle, the ferocity and carnage of human battle before my kind. And then he quotes Kirby and Spence telling us that the battles of ants have long been recorded and the date have been recorded, culminating, of course, with his own, that the battle which I witnessed took place in the presidency of Polk 5 years before the passage of Webster's Fugitive Slave Bill. Many have seen Thoreau is somewhat prophetic. It's almost as if he somehow knew, as he was studying ants jacking on each other, that it was only a matter of time before Americans would begin to kill each other, slaughter each other over the question of slavery. He moves on to cats. He has a little bit of a story about a winged cat, and then he gets to the loon. And the loon passage, I mean, these amazing birds. You guys should Google image a loon if you've never seen one. There's these kind of amazing birds. And he talks about this loon that would show up. And he said, when I went to get a pail of water early in the morning, I frequently saw this stately bird sailing out of my cove within a few rods. If I endeavored to overtake him in a boat in order to see how he would maneuver, he'd dive and be completely lost, so that I did not have to discover him again, sometimes till the latter part of the day. But I was more than a match for him on the surface. He commonly went off in a rain. And then he tells about how he'll start to go on his boat and he tries to get close to one of these loons. It was surprising, he says, how quickly the loon made up his mind and put his resolve into execution. He led me at once to the widest part of the pond and would not be driven from it. While he was thinking one thing in his brain, I was endeavoring to divine his thought in mine. Now, of course, we can see this as a powerful symbol. That is to say, the seeker. And we have to think of our Dante, and of course, especially that longing to take the journey to find what it is that one must know to get out of the dark wood of error, right? And here he is, Thoreau, trying to find his way to this loon. It was a pretty game, played on the smooth surface of the pond, a man against a loon. Suddenly your adversary's checker disappears beneath the board. The problem is to place yours nearest to where his will appear again. From war we go to checkers, right? It's all about contests of a kind. Sometimes he'd come up unexpectedly, the loon, on the opposite side of me, having apparently passed directly into the boat. So long-winded was he and so unweariable that when he had swum farthest, he would immediately plunge again, nevertheless, and then no wit could divine where in the deep pond beneath the smooth surface he might be speeding his way like a fish, for he had time and ability to visit the bottom of the pond at its deepest part. He'll say that Walden Pond's deeper than 80 feet beneath. He says, and then he'd come up, and then when he'd come up, it's almost like he'd laugh or howl at me, and he asks, why exactly would that happen? He says, why? after displaying so much cunning that he invariably betrayed himself the moment he came up by that loud laugh. Did not his white breast enough betray him? He was indeed, he says, a silly loon. And then finally we finish with ducks, and he'll make some observations about ducks. And then he will finish by making the observation about the ducks that besides safety, these ducks got by sailing in the middle of Walden. I do not know unless they love its water for the same reason that I do. Well, as we move on then to chapter 13 and housewarming, we will be moved by the way in which Thoreau can pay attention so well to something as seemingly insignificant as ant war. I hope that this kind of reading will make you go back and read the Iliad all over again from a different perspective. Thank you.